see. File. Reopen a project. We had from 06, that was our homework assignment. Is that right? Okay, so Winnie, you were saying specifically concerning the last part of the style there, right? Okay, so I'm going to, where's this? Is it the downloads? I will open that file so we can take a look at it real quick. Okay, so you were having problems overwriting the white, the last line, this one down here. Okay, maybe that's not what I understood was the problem. So let's see, we got 100%. So we're going to do 10, 20, 30, 40. Ah, doing it wrong, aren't I? 20, 40, 60, 80. It's 100. Okay. So this one was 0.8, 0.6, 0.4, 0.2. I'm not sure. Like that? Is that what the problem you're having? Is that the last one stayed white? Okay, so I think you have. Let's put it at 0 and see what happens. Yeah, so it's good. So that was the HSLA. That was the style class I did. There's the color, which gives the red, and then the 0.0 is all the way down to the last, and that will override the color on it. It is a P class, and so if you looked at your style sheet, the style sheet defined for P was white, and then everything else is set there. Does that make sense for everyone? Do you guys do something similar? Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's jump into like a YouTuber when I say let's jump into. Have you ever noticed that? All right, guys. They always say that, right? Let's jump into it. Um, let's jump into it. Okay. I'm offline. That's wild. How am I offline? Let's try that one. No. Is you guys Wi-Fi working? All right. Well, so it's not going to let me broadcast, which is wild, but you can still see everything for the most part, right? Because I got all the slides loaded. Um, let's just, where's my max at? Really? All right. So we're going to look at today CSS, and we're going to look at the 3 different ways you can do the style sheets. We're also going to consider later on some of the different type of CSS selectors. Let's talk about external style sheets. I've demonstrated them to you so far. Um, the file name needs to end in .css. Now there are some new file names extensions for CSS. I think they're SCSS. Um, I don't think the scope of this class will get into those. Your selectors are basically, you have the selector and then the property and the value. And of course, we have the typical examples so far. You guys are comfortable with this so far, right? All right, this is very basic. Any questions about the commenting that you see here, how that works? This comment block has commented out this bottom image portion. So that's how that comment is working. All right. Your external CSS, you're doing it through uh, the link tag, and you're giving the rel attribute a style sheet and the href as style.css. That is your path. That href could refer to another website. Maybe you found a website out there, and some of them, they have style sheets that you can download and use for free. Great examples are Bootstrap, and you can actually buy custom-built CSS for your sites on those places. They charge, I think, like $10, and you can generate all the styles and colors, and they're fantastic. A lot of businesses use those because you can spend a lot of time, but you still need to know it. Still need to know it. The other thing it's missing here, which is different, is the type. In earlier versions of CSS, before CSS3, you had to have the type attribute specified, where you would say text CSS. You don't have to have that here. So just the rel and the href. External CSS. Notice that the link tags must be inside the head tags on your page, right? They have to be there in order to reference them. External style sheets are always the best design option. Always the best design option. If you have to use embedded, you can, and of course you can also use inline. But using the external is the best option. And as your sites get bigger and bigger, you may end up with multiple CSS files. Some of them to control fonts. Some of them may be for certain types of devices. Some of them may be for print, and so forth. Let's look at embedded. In the embedded style sheet, again, the style tags must occur within the head tags. And so you can see here that there's the style, then there's my selector with the property values that are separated by semicolons, right? And each property value is separated by a colon, which is the pattern it follows. When you're looking at embedded, sometimes embedded is useful when you have a high traffic site. So if you're trying to speed up how fast your site should load, then maybe it's the first page of a site where you have hundreds of thousands of visitors coming to your site, right? If that's the case, then maybe that first page is good to have some embedded things to help it to load quicker. Usually, though, you want to use external style sheets. Again, the same thing you noticed in previous versions, the HTML would ask for style with the attribute type text/CSS. That's not required in the new CSS. And of course, we get back to the exclamation important, which always wins in a conflict between external and embedded. So if you have something that you want to overwrite no matter what, then you put that important on it. Okay. In this case, we have embedded style sheet, but we also have an external. This is common. But which style sheet will win the override, the precedence? Which one do you think will take it? The one that comes last. So if in this case I have the link tag at the bottom, it will win if there's a conflict. However, if I want mine to win, the embedded, I want to make sure that that link is up before the style attribute. Make sense? Always last in, first out, right? Last in always wins. It's cheating, right? But it's just the way it works with this because it's overriding the styles as they come in. So that's the rule you need to remember. Last in. Embedded versus external. So with both embedded and external, you can use the class attribute in your selectors. You cannot use class attributes with inline, which makes sense because it's right on the HTML tag itself with an inline style attribute. Always remember that your class selector, when it's inside the style sheet or inside the style tags, the class selector always begins with a dot. When it's on the class itself that you're referencing, it doesn't have the dot. So you can see that here. Excuse me. I have container preceded with the dot. That's in the style sheet. And down here on the class, it doesn't have the dot. That's always the format you want to follow. Same thing for IDs. If you have an ID, it would be like that with a hashtag, right? And then down here, it would say ID equals whatever your ID is, my ID, right? So you could specify it like that. Okay. All right. Let's go on down to the next part. With inline, inline takes the greatest precedence of all. So really the only reason to have inline styles are if you are testing. Like you're just trying to style things as you go, you do it as inline. But you want to make sure to make it a habit to grab that style and put it as a class, or make sure you're referencing the right selector and put it in your style sheet. Okay. Another reason to have an inline style is, let's say that you are writing something here on Saipan or elsewhere, a news feed, and you want to ensure this isn't 100%. Okay, always remember that. But you want to try to ensure that your style shows up for your news feed and whoever is displaying it on their site. Twitter does this. You can display Twitter comments on your page, and you're basically accepting whatever style from Twitter. And Twitter will typically put it either using JavaScript, they'll overwrite what you have using JavaScript files to make it all inline, or they'll pass inline style comments. That's really the only times you want to use it, but it's not 100%, okay? Because you can always get around, always override someone's style with the important, exclamation important, okay? All right, so overriding a style sheet. I mentioned this earlier. You can override styles on a page using JavaScript. I just recently, in my work for Indiana State, we have a theming server, and I spent a week trying to figure out why in the world my themes were not being pushed down on these different sites. And I found that there was a bug um, in their code, and I had to write my own custom JavaScript that wrote a inline comment into the text to force my own custom CSS that I wanted to appear. So you can do it with JavaScript also. You can force override on things. And wherever you put the JavaScript on a page, it will override it. You can again use the important tag. Only use important though if you want to override something. So let's say now you're the one ingesting stuff from a news feed and you're displaying that on your site. That's where you would use your own um, your own exclamation important. The one thing I did not put on here, you cannot override if you're using an iframe. It's not in your textbook and it's not on the slides anywhere. If you have text coming in on an iframe, that iframe is literally treated like its own browser. And so whatever comes in on that iframe is what's on that iframe. And you can't override it. So that's just kind of keep that in mind. Keep in mind again the order that the styles are loaded. So the last in, last loaded always wins, unless again, and I keep hammering on this, unless it's the exclamation important. But as a general rule, you don't want to use exclamation important, because if you start putting inline statements and exclamation importance all over your code, it just becomes a headache. Because then your boss is gonna say, "Hey, we need to change the styles," and you're gonna look at them and go, "Really?" And it's on you because that's your job, right? So it's always better to make your job easier. Put your styles in an external style sheet so you have controllability of it. It's maintainable, it's repeatable. And as you move into software development, something that is repeatable and maintainable, that's a win. If it isn't repeatable and maintainable, easy to modify, it's a headache. All right. The other reason why we generally prefer to keep things separate, there is a term in software development called separation of concerns. So you see this sometimes in business organizations. You have a secretary. Her job is different than someone who's in HR, which is different than somebody who is in IT, which is different than somebody who works down in the dining facility. Everyone has their own lane that they work on. And by everything in your code having its own lane that it's supposed to do, it makes it easier to address problems and concerns. All right. So we have another idea here, and this is called media specific. Later on, I think chapter 10 and chapter 11, or maybe chapter 12, you're going to get into screen sizes, where you actually will use the media attribute with media queries to control what types of styles are displayed based on how big your browser window is. And you may have noticed in some sites, when you take the browser window and you shrink it, the site reformats automatically, and it looks like what you have on a phone. It's because they're using media queries in the background to reformat that site for you, so that whether you're on a phone or a tablet, a screen, sometimes a projector, sometimes a TV, that it will always reformat to the correct size. And that's you'll notice that folks who sites that are more professional, they use those media specific queries. All right, in our instance though, here we have two different types of CSS files. One is for screen and one is for print. The default is all. So you have the three that you could put. Now there are more than that, but not all browsers are created equal, and I literally mean that. And so each browser may not support some of these different media types. There are media types for TV, there are media types for projector, there are media types for mobile, and so forth. And not all browsers support it, which is a shame. So if you don't include media as an attribute in your link tag, the default is all. So in this case, if it's print and you tell the browser, you come up here to like, within Chrome and you say file print, it will take the CSS that refers to print that's using that media type, and it'll take that CSS to print with. If you don't have it, then it prints based on the default. So that's a nice feature too. So if you want to make your site print friendly, you create a print CSS file. All right. Typically though, you only have a screen because we're not lazy. It's just that sometimes we don't care about other people, and we should care, but we don't. But all right. So those are the things you can do there. Let's take a look at this example. So here is a media specific version where we say at media print. Notice that all of the standard CSS is wrapped inside the two curly brackets, the opening and closing curly bracket for the print. So in this case, you have one style sheet, but the style sheet inside of it has the media type that it's supposed to use if it's print. Sometimes for those, if you're going to print, maybe you're going to say just exclude my video files, exclude images, exclude everything else, just the text. That's what you could use for print in that case. Now, these are the other types, the other 9 possible types of media that you could use. All is default. I have no idea what Arial is. I can't pronounce it. I don't know what it is. There's a Braille type. You know what Braille is? Braille means that it's going to. Have you seen these on TV before? They'll have like a little keyboard that has a set of dots that runs underneath, and those who are visually impaired, they can put their fingers on the set of dots, and it will display back for them in Braille. That's what that's for. It makes it easier for for those who are visually impaired. Handheld was the idea for mobile devices. It never really made it. It's still available in CSS3, but not all browsers support it. Print is obviously common. Screen is common. Projection. The idea with projection is that if it's available and you're going through a projector, it will detect it. The browser will know that and use the projection CSS if you've defined one. And then they also have it for TV, which could be useful because we have a number of devices now that you can actually write for, like Apple TV or Amazon Fire TV, or all of these different devices that are technically capable now of going and scrolling the internet. But you want your CSS then to take advantage of whatever device they're using. So that's the idea behind that. Any questions with that so far? Does that make sense? Okay. And then we have our selectors. Okay, so the first one we're familiar with, dot container. Dot container is referring to what kind of selector? A class selector, right? How about div dot container? What's going on with that one? Div dot container may seem redundant. So a div is an HTML tag on a page. And what we're saying here with this particular version is we're saying any divs that have the class selector called container. So this is important. It may seem redundant, but let's say that you also have p tags that have a class of container. Then that makes sense. Now you're saying only my divs that have the class container. Okay, let's go on down to the next one. The next one is div.container space p. What do you think? In this instance, the style is only being forced on the element p, which is inside the div that has the class container, right? Okay, what about div greater than p? This is saying any paragraphs inside any div. Okay. All right. Those become more generalistic ways that you can control your styling within your CSS. So if you look at that here, I have dot container. We see that the dot container will reference this one. We see div dot container will also reference this one and this one. I meant to actually make this a span. Let's make this one a span, so it makes more sense. for our example. There we go. So dot container will refer to any of these, span and div, because they both have the container class. Div.container will only refer to the div class, right? Div.container.p will only refer to the div container that has a p, but not the article, right? And div greater than p would refer to, again, this div and this p tag. All right, let's go down to another example. So here we have a container class using the strange symbolism of p plus p. We're not in algebra, I promise you. You guys have read your textbooks this week, right? Can anyone tell me what this one is? It's on the screen if you want to read what's on the screen. So in this instance, I'm saying give me all classes that have container that have a p, a paragraph element, that is directly followed by a paragraph element. And so the only paragraph element that's going to be, the style will be specified on, is the one that follows the paragraph element that's inside of the container, the dot container. That's what that syntax says. So that means that you can specify which paragraph element you want to be, the style to be different on. In this scenario, it says H1 tilde H2. And this basically says every H2 that follows a sibling of H1. So a sibling is what? If we were to look at the DOM again back up here on this, let's see, let's do this one. Siblings, this paragraph and this article here are siblings because they're at the same level inside of the div, right? But the div is the parent to these children. Make sense? And the div has siblings. What are the siblings of the div? The span, right? And the span and the div have a parent, which is the body. So that's important when you're thinking about this. So in this instance, H1 tilde H2, if we were to do that over here, we would say, maybe we wanted to say P tilde article. The way that rule would work is all articles that have a sibling of P would have a style. If they don't have a P, then they wouldn't have the style. Does that make sense? That's the way that rule works. All right, so we also have these pseudo classes. Pseudo classes, they give you a lot more fine-grained control. Is that correct grammar? It gives you controllability over certain things. Now, we've used some pseudo classes before in here in the class. I use one called colon click, colon hover, colon visited, and those were used specifically for your A tags, which are your hyperlinks, right? So you notice on a hyperlink when you hover over them, they sometimes change color, right? Right. So these pseudo classes, they're basically saying if I have whatever my ancestor is, whatever my parent is, the first child of that ancestor, of that parent, will be the one that the style affects. Conversely, I could say whatever the last child is of that ancestor. So that can become useful, especially if you have a larger list and you just want to say only apply this style to this last one, right? Okay, this is also very useful in UI, LI items. These are like bullet lists. So you're going to find more about UL, which is unlisted, and LI is list item. Sometimes it would be, I can't remember the exact tag names, but you're going to get into those a little bit more later. Many times the first child, last child are very useful in that. Another pseudo class, which I'll be honest, I didn't know that these were available until I started reading this. This tells you how quick the technology changes. That is the first line and first letter pseudo tags. So with first line, you could have, say something like over here, and in your CSS, you could say div container, let's say div container P first line. And so that means that the style would only affect what? The first line up to the exclamation mark, which would be your ending sentence, period, exclamation mark, question mark, whatever, right? You also have first word. You also have first letter. And so those are sometimes useful. You may have seen on, you open up some books, and the very first letter at the top of the page is this giant letter, right? Well, you can actually do that in HTML without having to create all these special style tags. You could just say P, first letter, go crazy, right? All right, so that's some examples there of your CSS selectors. Okay, so we have your hyperlinks. Can y'all see that, or is that too small? Let me see if I can make it bigger for you. Is that a little better? Okay. All right, so with your hyperlink tags are, remember the A tags, right? They're followed by an href, and the href could be some type of local resource like a page, text file, PDF, could be a telephone number, right? But here in the style sheet, we're saying that we're going to control what the link looks like. So here we're going to say that the link is going to be red. When it's visited, meaning after someone's clicked and gone to another page, the browser is going to remember that for that individual, and it's going to be orange. Or if the focus, meaning you're about to, what's that? Focus is kind of like hover, but it's usually what you do on the keyboard if you're tabbing through the links. Hover, of course. Oh, we're live now, aren't we? There we go. Much better. Hover, of course, is when you're bringing your mouse over something and you're hovering on it. And then you have active. Okay, now these pseudo links, depending on the browser, you can also use on other types of links. So you can create a div and control what happens with that div, like when you hover over it or do something with it. You can also do that with buttons. You can change the styles of buttons and make them look completely different. Okay. All right, so now we get into some more complicated. I have used these specifically when I was using a JavaScript library called jQuery. And this gave us very detailed control over elements within the document object model, which is what is your HTML is based on. So you have your attribute. Your attribute is always in brackets, right? So on your CSS, if you see bracket, class, bracket, that's saying everything that has a class applies something to it. If you see bracket, the name attribute equals some value, then we're saying only where that the name attribute equals absolutely that value. It has to equal it 100% for it to be right, meaning it can't have uppercase, lower. It's all got to be the same case and everything. Then you also have the tilde equals. You have the pipe equals, and this is a screenshot basically right out of your book. These are very useful if you're trying, especially as you get into web programming with JavaScript or other languages. You can embed these attributes and and do some pretty cool dynamic things. I remember I built a calendar app all in JavaScript with CSS, and you click on it and it would recalculate the months of the day and repaint it right to this little div and everything. And it was all using um, just stuff like that. Okay. Any questions so far? Your typical way you'll see this used is you'll see the tag name itself, bracket, the name of the tag attribute, in this case href, equals something, and then closing it off with a um, closing attribute. All right, so now you get into groups, CSS groups. So you can do, you can comma separate your tags. Don't fall asleep. You can comma separate your tags, like h1, comma h2, comma p, whatever, and you can specify a list of tags to have certain things. Okay, so here's a challenge for you. Can you tell me what is happening right here with this CSS selector? Hopefully you'll never do this on your pages, but the power to specify styles all the way down with this type of specificity is there. Can you tell me what it exactly is doing? Sometimes it's easier to start from the back end and work up. So we know there is a EM tag, right? This is talking to somewhere. That is inside the P tag, right? That is inside a H2 tag, which has a attribute of lang, which has to equal Spanish, which is inside some class called project. Does that make sense? So you can actually control down to the very specific what you want your styles to be on a page. I don't know where you would want to do that, but you can do that. Okay, and that's it. Any questions so far on what we've got? Any questions? Any questions with your homework so far or the discussions this week? I've been reading through them. I haven't commented on your all's forum questions yet, but I've seen a lot of you posting some great sites for your CSS. One of you posted one about a YouTube channel. Which was that? Who was that? Found something on YouTube. Was that what was the tutorial you found? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool, cool. Anybody else like to anybody else like to share something you found? No? Okay. Um, let's do some quick housekeeping here. We have I believe it is next week. Next week is the midterm. Okay. This is online. Um, the way this is written is you get 2 attempts at it and your highest score wins. Okay. That's going to be due the 6th. So if we're looking at our schedule, that's due Sunday. That's not right. Okay, let me look at that because that is week 6. We're on week 5. I'll fix that. That is going to be due the, let's see, not the 13th. That's when that'll be due. Okay. Yeah. That is going to be on the 13th. I'll have to go back in and fix that. Okay, so let's open up your homework assignment and take a quick look at this. We have the page, and this is the page in its basic form. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and work through this assignment. If you guys would like to bring up your own text editors and work through this, we can. This is the assignment for the week. And then, of course, you can email this stuff to yourself off these computers, right? Okay. All right, so I have, let's open up the Word doc. So the directions are you need to create a cascading style sheet file named HW07CSS in the CSS folder. So let's take a look at it here. Do we have a CSS folder? We don't. So let's create a new folder, CSS, and create a new file. We're calling it HW07 according to what the directions say. The file should contain the proper styles to display the following image as instructed. You should not modify any part of the code in the HTML. So we can't modify any of the HTML for this. Very important. Don't modify the HTML. All right. So we have a H1, we have an H2 style, we have our text that is red, and we have information in step 2. So let's go into our CSS. We'll create the H1. And the H1, the background color is that. So I'm just going to paste that in. We'll come over here to the style. All right, so that's already referenced there. Let's just refresh and see what we get so far. Okay, pretty straightforward. Let's see, what does the Word doc say? The text color is that. Okay, you guys working on this, or you having other conversations? Okay. Let's see. The height is 86 pixels. Okay. Does that look right so far? It looks straight. So that is for step 1. Step 2 is H2. So let's create the H2. And the background color looks like the same thing. The text color is the same thing. Okay. 3 is red, which is that span class. So let's take a look at that. It's company name, right? So we'll do company name, color red. Did I save it? There we go. Okay. And the same as information is step 2. So 4 is green. That's all your assignment is? Oh, my word. Did I miss something else? Yeah, so we got to have the text is surrounded by a blue dotted border. Wow. Okay. Let's see. Border dotted. Let's see, 1 px dotted and blue. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head here. All right, so that's dotted, but I don't think that's right. I think it's something else. Is that dashed? Or is it? It's hard to tell, isn't it? Let's. Hey, there you go. All right. Okay, so there are some things here that are kind of some redundant. What is redundant in the style? Yeah. So what's another way we could do this? We could say H1, H2, like that. I save it. There you go. So we've made it less redundant. We've used a little bit of our CSS rules, right? There you go. I think Carol's assignment last week was more complex. All right, let's make sure we didn't miss anything in the directions here. I would have thought they would have had in the directions that we spend some time working on the other elements in here. All right, just for fun, we'll go ahead and do some other things. What color do you want the link to be? Purple? Who said purple? Mahogany? You're gonna have to give me the RGB for that one. All right, so now they're purple. You know what? Let's look up the RGB for mahogany. RGB for mahogany. Did I spell that right? That's mahogany. Mahogany. Oh, there we go. Yeah. All right, so that's the RGB for it. All right. Did I save it? I don't remember if I saved it. That actually kind of works. Who suggested mahogany? Good job. Do you paint your house and all that? All right. So let's do another one. Let's do a visited. What color should we make it, Mr. Mahogany? What's that? Turquoise. Is that one of our available? No, it's not. Let's see. What is that, turquoise? Or is that turquoise? I'm not good with colors. What y'all tell me? Is that Turquoise is like a bluish green, right? Teal. These guys. Blondie blue. Oh, Bondi blue. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. All right. So we'll come over here and we'll make the visited. All right. So now file's not found. Really? Oh, because yeah, those pages don't exist. Let's make sure we didn't miss something in here though. Should not modify any part of the CSS code. Compress. All right. So that's interesting. Okay. We are pretty much at the limits of what we can do here. Oh, I know what we can do. Let's look at our HTML again. And we have the UI LIs. Let's do this. UL LI first child. And we'll make this your favorite color. Mahogany. Unless you want to come up with another color. There we go. So we used our first one. What's something else we could do from the class so far today? What about how about last child? I think we can do it just like this as well, right? We'll use the visited color since we didn't get that to show. There we go. Last child. How about the copyright? All right, so let's take a look at that. Copyright is in the footer. So we're going to say footer colon first, what is it, word? I thought first word was one. It's not coming up as... I am sweating. Are you all hot in here? I don't think first word is one. I think it's first letter. There we go. So we made the first letter. Yeah. Let's make it a little bit more interesting. Let's say the font size is 24 pixels. There we go. Okay. Perspiring up here. What else can we do that we did from our... What else did we learn today? How about we try one of those attribute selectors? What do you think? Let's check this out. We have... Let's do an attribute selector. We don't have a lot of attribute selectors, do we? Let's do one on href is contact HTML. Let's do that one. So we'll come up here. Remember our syntax, it is bracket href equals, what was it, services, HTML. And let's Let's change the font family to Tahoma. Uh-oh. Did I do something wrong? I don't think you have to have the A. Let me make sure I can't remember if I have to put quotes around it or not. I think I do. There we go. So I was able to specify just by that attribute. So let's take out the A. Make sure I was right. Yeah. So we specify by an attribute now. What's one other thing that we did that we talked about today in class? Any ideas? Oh, we didn't do media, right? Okay. So if we're going to do media, we'd come up here and we would say, was it at media? And then let's see, this is screen. Okay, so this, everything should work correctly when I do that. But if I change this to print, everything still works correctly. Oh, because there it is right there. Make sure I've got, yeah. There, it goes back to the normal. However, since I changed it to print, I should be able to come up here to File, Print As, and we should pull up the style. Yeah. It's not very pretty, but yeah. So that verifies that the at media print works, right? If we make it all, it should default to screen, right? Yeah. And if I do print, it should just use that. Yeah, same thing. What was the other one? There was a TV. I have serious doubt that this is supported by the browser, but we'll see. No, it's not. Projection, was that the other one? Or, I think it was, yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. Let's go back through your textbook and find it. And on and on and on we go. I may be going the wrong direction. Pretty sure though it was back this way. Ah, here it is, media. Projection, yeah. Okay, so projection is a valid one, but I have serious doubts that this will work because most of them don't support it. Yeah, it doesn't. It's not working either. All right, so we got print and we got screen. We know screen works. All right. Anything else that we need to try to test again? Okay. I am out of examples for this class. Are you guys, if you don't have any other questions today,